What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a review of Greedfall after I completely finished all of the achievements. So this is kind of a new thing for me, so I've never really done a video like this is what I'm saying by that. So with that in mind, any feedback anybody wants to give on the format or information covered, feel free to leave it in the comments down below, always open to suggestions. Diving right into it. So in Greedfall, you play as Sir or Madame de Sardet. You're going to be exploring the island of Tir-Fredi, a mythical island of legend. The main reason you're going there, and what you are in hopes of truly finding, is a cure to the Malachor, which is a blood plague that has been ravaging all of the nations around you, and yours as well. So you play as the legate of the merchant congregation, which basically means you're an ambassador to other nations while you'll be going to this island to explore. So essentially you're there to represent the merchant congregation, which is your faction, and handle any diplomatic problems that may arise in regards to the other nations. Those nations being, again, the merchant congregation, your own particular faction, as well as the Bridge Alliance, which are primarily scholars focused on continuing their scientific efforts. The Ptolemy, which are a religious group, they are on the island because it is rumored that their saint, Saint Matthias, went to this island, and that is a core belief of their faith. You have the Coin Guard, which are largely mercenaries that all the other factions employ to guard things, as well as just serve as their general military. You have the Knots, which are basically in charge of all of the sailing. They have extensive sailing knowledge. And then, of course, we have the natives, the people who actually live on Tir-Fredi once you get there. Now, all of these factions, typically speaking, have sub-factions. The Ptolemy have the Ordo Luminous. The Bridge Alliance have people who are ethically questionable in their pursuit of knowledge. They don't actually have like a particular name for that group, though. The Coin Guard actually has a couple that I don't want to spoil for anybody. The only one that seemingly doesn't have some sort of sub-faction is actually the Knots. They seem mostly to be exactly what they are. That said, they are subject to their own plot devices and things like that that will kind of shock you, but they don't really have any sub-factions to speak of. Now, the natives are probably the best example of this, because the natives are separated into clans, and every single one of those clans actually has a very distinct feel and way of conducting themselves. That brings us on to choices. What does this look like from an RPG standpoint, with you being the diplomatic ambassador, as well as all these alliances? Well, more often than not, the way it happens is you'll either be presented with choices that you get to pick like normal, or you'll be taken for a bit of a ride where you're doing more basically just following a conversation, and then at the end of a big quest you might have a conversation option to pick or make a decision. Those are pretty much how it falls down, which is fairly standard for spiders in general, the developer that is. What they like to do is typically make a character and then allow you to make some of the choices, but for the most part, you're always going to be this diplomatic ambassador. So versus, say, in the Technomancer, you were always going to be Zachariah the Technomancer, so there's only so many choices you can make from that particular angle. With those things said, I want to move on to the character progression. So character progression is, of course, your standard RPG fare, where you level up from killing things and doing, completing quests and things like that, and then you get to spend skill points, attributes, and talents. Skills you'll get every level, whereas attributes and talents you'll get every few levels. The best part here is that it ties into combat really well. So this is probably Spider's best iteration of their combat system. Once you've played their other games, if you have played any of them, you'll notice that there's a lot of similarities in the systems. Basically, they just iterate on it and kind of make improvements here and there, which is fairly standard for most developers, I'd say. Like, you can always tell an Ubisoft game from any other game, at least for me. Combat, it takes all of those things, your attributes, of course, determining your damage with specific weapon types, as well as your resource pools, whereas talents affect more of exploration and conversations. So with skills and attributes, there are a ton of builds. You can do magic, which is always cool. Of course, melee weapons, one-handed versus two-handed weapons, as well as firearm builds. Now, typically speaking, you want to kind of mix and match these a little bit to get the best results. The game actually encourages weapon swapping, which is totally an option. I have to say, the scaling of bosses in this game is really good. Like, there's very little squish, even on the higher difficulty levels. It's more about your ability to handle what's going on than anything else. So with the higher difficulties especially, it doesn't really, it increases the health a little bit, sure, but most of the challenge actually comes from it reducing cooldown times, if you want to call them that, for enemies. So like they move faster, they do their attacks faster, and it's basically your ability to deal with that versus actually just plowing through ridiculous health pools, which I thought was a great way to go. So with that said, the animations and everything are a bit lackluster, which I think again kind of comes down to it being a AA game versus a AAA game. So in my opinion, that's pretty forgettable. Moving on to the companions. There is a companion that represents every single faction. So, there's one for the Bridge Alliance, one for the natives, etc. None of them are bad, but they're also not super memorable, at least in my opinion either. Like one or two of the quests really resonated with me, but that's kind of what I'm saying. The quests you will probably remember. The quests for the companions are focused more on exploring the world, just in the way that everything Greedfall does is all about exploring the world. It kind of digs into the lore and how this world functions that have happened. Because of that, the actual development of these side characters doesn't really pan out, so you won't really see them grow. And sure, a couple things here and there, they might learn something, but in my opinion, there isn't like a super ton of character development. With that, the last couple things I wanted to mention is the voice acting is impeccable. Like, there's a couple that really blew me away, but moreover, despite this being a relatively small project for a game, you don't hear any repeats, everything sounds good, it's impressive. And then of course we have the music. Music is, it's okay. There's none of the tracks really stand out to me. Like, I'm never gonna like, oh, that's a Greedfall song or anything like that. But that said, the music is great. It definitely sets the tone. It's just, it's not super memorable compared to like D2, you know what I mean? Diablo 2, that is. Like, I could pick a song out of that game for sure. That leaves us with one more thing I want to discuss, and that is technical problems. So, straight up, as you've probably seen from some of this footage, facial animations are bad, guys. They don't get better. The whole game, they're kind of like that. Some places are better than others, but they're in general pretty bad. So there's that. That said, I encountered very few bugs, like once or twice. And what I mean by that is twice when I was playing, and I mean literally only twice in like the 100 hours it took me to 100% this thing, I had a quest bug where like I would walk to where I'm supposed to walk, but like the quest wouldn't trigger or continue on. And I honestly think that's a little bit my fault, because using some running and speed improving things, I kind of got there, I think, a little faster than the game anticipated me to be there, and it kind of broke it. That said, literally both times that happened, all that was required of me to fix it was just load the previous autosave, and the game cleared it out itself and carried on as normal. So it's not like I lost any time. That said, it would be kind of difficult to lose any time because the game autosaves constantly. I never lost more than like 30 seconds to a minute, even on a normal death. And the last technical portion of this that I want to mention is they kind of have this weird quest auto travel where like sometimes when you complete an objective for a quest, it'll let you fast travel either back to the person who gave you the quest or the next area you need to be in. And it does that basically anytime you need to backtrack. The problem is I found that to be a little inconsistent. There are times that it'll actually let you do that and it's super convenient. And there's other times where you'll be doing the exact same thing, basically, but it won't let you travel back. So it's just kind of a little inconsistent in that regard. So there you go, guys. That is my review for Greedfall after completing it 100%. And again, just real quick, this is kind of my first video like this, so if you guys have any comments or feedback you'd like to put down in the description, by all means, let me know. I'd love to hear it from you. I also wanted to mention that the channel recently got memberships approved, so for a single $1, you can get a badge by your name in the comments and or any live streams that I happen to do, as well as getting access to some custom emojis as well. And of course, access to members-only community posts in the community tab of the YouTube channel, as well as a couple other things. So if you want to navigate to the main YouTube channel page and click the join button, which you can see here, you can certainly take a look at that. Of course, any support at all is definitely appreciated, but regardless, I hope you enjoyed the video and have a great day.